memorable characters, they always want something. It can be something very specific. They go on a quest, or might they just be they want justice. Sometimes it might not even start out that way. They may actually just react. Like this character in my story, he's at one point he's just reacting to whatever the Mert egg does, because that Mert egg is pretty ferocious. But eventually, you want a character that's going to take matters into his own hand. He's going to make things happen. He has to face adversity, and he's usually going to fail at first. If it's too easy, it's boring. So he has to really battle. Maybe things don't work out. Usually things get worse. But he can't just be reacting. He has to keep battling. Eventually, he has to overcome it in some way if there's a good ending. Or, of course, you can have a sad ending. But he has to struggle and fight all the way through on this type of thing. So that's the main tip, that you really need to have a character that really wants something and is going to do whatever it takes to get it, although facing adversity. He may even give up at one point and then have a side character convince him to continue or something, but he has to do it. The other thing, here's the thing that I think goes for every story. There's really two ways of developing a character for a story. I think you can literally divide all story writers into one of two types. Those who start with a character and they write a story around it, and those who come up with a story idea and then come up with characters around it. Both ways work. Now, a lot of times they say character is king, but it's real important that you develop good characters. But some people come with that great character, then they start thinking of a story around it. Now, I tend to go the other way. I'm more of an idea writer. I like to come up with a story and then spend a lot of time thinking what would be a great character or characters that go with the story. Usually a good character, bad character, side characters, that type of thing. The reason I wanted my adversary in this one, the Mert egg, to be slightly humorous, is I wanted to have something like that. A lot of times you'll have a hero who has a humorous sidekick or something like that. In this case, I decided to just have the two of them and let the Mert be this humorous sidekick, which works because they're going to spend a lot of time together, as you'll find out in the story, a lot of time together.
I would say don't overthink it. Okay, so in developing my own characters' own stories, because I don't write frequently, it takes months. So it's not that I'm researching throughout those months. It's just I'm a lazy writer. But I would say that look at your own self. I'm presently watching Westworld, and there's this thing. Westworld. I don't know if anybody has watched Westworld or seen Westworld, but there's this thing. It's a sci-fi story where they create lifelike robots and everything. And in creating the robots, they have little gestures called reveries that make the robots seem more lifelike. And that's also what you want to do with your character. What I would say you should do with your characters. There are little things that you have to inebriate or put into. It doesn't necessarily have to tie into the story. For example, you can, you can relate how something they are doing in the present. You can relate it to a memory they have or something they remember. It doesn't necessarily have to tie to the plot of the story, but making them lifelike, giving them little gestures, making them make mistakes. If you have a perfect character, the character won't. There's no such thing as a perfect character. Each character must have its own imperfections. So things like biting fingernails, being nervous and everything. I would say listen and look at your friends, look at your family. The little gestures everyone makes, try to weave it into your character outline, try to weave it into your story and see where it can fit in. So that's a tip I would give.
I think to step off the page, the character needs to be, if not relatable, at least realistic. Whether they're wild, exaggerated, brash, meek, whatever it is, the reader needs to be able to visualize that person being right there in the room with them. So they need to be consistent. Their actions and emotions can't be dictated by the story. They need to believe that they're a real person with real reactions and consequences. And to me, memorable dialogue goes a long way. So patterns and styles of speech give so much to a character's personality. I also think, like I did with Johnson, rather than always making my main characters step off the page, I like to try and draw the reader to step into the page. Like I said, the character to be a vessel for the reader to immerse and experience the story. So while the story may sometimes create the character, that it's important for that relationship to go both ways. The logical or consistent actions and decisions that are made by Johnson and the others may seem reactionary in the moment, but given the true nature of their predicament, I think those real character decisions result in a very causal impact on the circumstances and ultimate resolution. So the characters can't just be along for the ride. It's important.
For me, I can only speak from my own experience. So again, I always go back to dialogue. I think the best and the most evocative and the most visceral way that you can get a character jumping off the page is through their dialogue. If you can master that, then I think everything follows from that. At least it does for me. But of course, I mean, dialogue is one of my most favorite things in fiction, right? In anything, in movies, in the written word too. I just love dialogue. So of course, I'm going to say that. But yeah, I think that's been the most useful thing to me. And the next, I suppose secondary to that, I would just fall back onto the old chestnut show, don't tell. If you can just show their actions. And maybe you don't even really need to understand what those actions mean in that first draft. Just put them down there and sort of, and maybe work from gut instinct. And then you can, in the rewrites, you can take a step back and you can say, well, what does that actually mean? And does that fit with the overall character? And you can kind of edit it down from there. So yeah, in my simplest form, my advice would be get them talking and get them moving and then see where that takes you.
For me, I think a character should have a really solid, actionable goal. Even if that's a goal that changes through the arc of their story. So often you'll find characters will have a goal that they start with in a story, and then as the story progresses, they realise that's no longer actually the thing that they want. But the fact that they have that, particularly if it's a goal that the reader can really get behind as something that they would root for as well, I think that that's definitely something that gives a place for the reader to latch onto right from the start. And then if you can then couple that to the character having really interesting weaknesses and flaws that make getting that goal much harder, I think that then gives you really, really good balance of sort of internal obstacles as well as whatever the external obstacles are that you've put in the way of that character, because it's very tempting to sort of keep throwing external problems at the character in the form of action or interpersonal conflict to make a character not able to achieve their goals. But sometimes the big obstacles actually come from within. So if you can give characters flaws and weaknesses that make that harder, then you can have these private moments that aren't action based, where the character still has doubts and fears as well, that the reader can also empathise with.
For me, the characters that are most engaging are the characters that are really honest to the point of bluntness. They don't have to be honest with everyone else, but they have to be, I think, aware of their own personality, of their own flaws and failings, and the characters who can take a really unflinching look at the terrible parts of themselves and still get on with it anyway. That's what I find really appealing. And often if you make characters honest to the point of this really sort of brutal bluntness, I mean, you can tap into a number of emotions with that. It can actually be really funny in a dark-humoured, black-humoured sort of way, but it can also be sad and sort of terrifying as well. It's a really good, I think, perspective or technique to apply if your characters are children or young people, because, as we grow up, we tend to develop a certain subtlety in talking about people, and we learn when to shut our mouths and when not to. But kids and young people don't do that so much. They have an opinion and out it comes, and I think that's a very attractive thing to read in a character, even if it's not always comfortable to be around.